In a small mining town, lost among the endless steppes, there lived a family: miner husband Alexei, his wife Marina, and their little son Ivan. Alexei was a hardworking and honest man. He devoted his entire life to working in the mine to provide his family with everything they needed. Marina was a beautiful and intelligent woman, but life in the provinces was a burden to her. On one of the ordinary days, when Alexei again went to work in the mine, Marina stayed at home, busy with ordinary household chores. She often felt lonely and sad when her husband was at work all day. Her thoughts increasingly returned to the past, when she was free and full of hope for a bright future. Sergei, Alexei's friend, was a frequent guest in their house. He worked at the local market and had his own small business. Marina always appreciated his sociability and wit. He often helped Alexei with household chores when he was busy at work, and warm and friendly relations gradually developed between Sergei and Marina. One day, on a day when Alexei was delayed in the mine due to emergency work, Sergei came to visit. Marina invited him to tea, and they began to talk about life, about how difficult it is to be a miner's wife, and about how her life has changed after marriage. The conversations became more and more personal, and Sergei began to notice melancholy and loneliness in Marina's eyes. Suddenly, a spark ran between them, and they, succumbing to sudden passion, forgot about everything in the world. At that moment, when they indulged in feelings, the door to the house suddenly opened, and Alexei appeared on the threshold. He returned ahead of time to surprise Marina. Shock, pain, and rage overwhelmed him when he saw his wife in the arms of a friend. Alexei couldn't believe his eyes. He froze on the threshold, unable to move or utter a word. Marina, realizing what had happened, jumped up and tried to explain herself, but the words got stuck in her throat. Sergei, realizing that he had been caught in the act of a crime, also did not know what to say. All Alexei could say was, "How could you?" And it sounded like a sentence. He left the house, slamming the door loudly, and walked down the street, not knowing where he was going. Thoughts of betrayal, anger, and pain haunted him. He did not come home that night, but spent it in an old, abandoned quarry, thinking about what had happened. The next day, Alexei returned home. He was determined to take revenge on Sergei for his betrayal. He did not talk to Marina, but simply collected his things and planned how to cope with the situation. It seemed to him that the only way to restore his honor was to challenge Sergei to a duel. Alexei found Sergei in the market and approached him with a firm expression on his face. He called him to a conversation and said, "You stole from me what is dear to me. We must solve this like men. Tomorrow at dawn, in the forest outside the city. Come alone." Sergei, frightened by Alexei's rage, tried to avoid the conflict, but Marina, having learned about the challenge, insisted that he accept it. "You must protect our love," she said. Sergei, realizing that he had no other choice, agreed. The night before the fight was anxious and sleepless for all three. Alexei spent it alone, thinking about what he had to do. He realized that his future, his honor, and his self-esteem depended on this fight. The night before the fight was anxious and sleepless for all three. Alexei spent it alone, thinking about what he had to do. He realized that his future, his honor, and his self-esteem depended on this fight. Sergei, on the contrary, was preparing for the fight with anxiety and fear. He understood that the chances of victory were slim, but it was too late to retreat. Marina tried to support him, despite her own doubts and fears. Her heart was torn between love for Sergei and guilt before Alexei. Dawn met them in the forest outside the city. The place chosen for the duel was quiet and secluded, with tall trees that hid them from prying eyes. Alexei and Sergei stood opposite each other, each of them realizing that this fight would change their lives forever. Alexei and Sergei met at the edge of the forest, where they were surrounded only by majestic trees and morning fog. The place was quiet, and only the singing of birds broke the ominous silence. Alexei stood with a stony expression on his face, his eyes burning with hatred and determination. Sergei, on the contrary, looked nervous and worried, but tried not to show his fear. Marina stood aside, not daring to approach the men, feeling responsible for what was happening. Her heart was beating fast, and she didn't know what this fight would lead to. Alexei began first. His voice sounded cold and firm. You knew that she was my wife, Sergei. Why did you do this? Sergei answered, trying to remain calm. Alexei, I didn't want this to happen. I love her, but I didn't want to hurt you. Love? Alexei grinned, his voice full of sarcasm. You call this love? You betrayed me, your friend! Marina couldn't stand it and intervened, her voice trembling. Alexei, please, let's resolve this peacefully. We've all made mistakes. Alexei, not paying attention to Marina, stepped closer to Sergei. There is no room for peaceful solutions here, Marina. This must end here and now. Sergei sighed, realizing that it would be impossible to avoid the conflict. He clenched his fists and took a fighting stance. If that's what you want, Alexei, let's get this over with. The men began to fight. Alexei, tempered by hard work in the mine, had strength and endurance. He rushed at Sergei with fury, striking with such force that Sergei barely had time to defend himself. Each blow from Alexei was accompanied by outbursts of his pain and anger. Sergei, despite his agility and speed, could not compare with Alexei's power. He tried to counterattack, but every time he managed to strike, Alexei seemed not to feel pain. Soon Sergei began to get tired, his movements became slower, and his blows became weaker. Marina, watching the fight, could not hold back her tears. She realized that she was to blame for what was happening and did not know how to stop this terrible fight. Finally, Alexei, taking advantage of the moment when Sergei stumbled, struck the decisive blow. Sergei fell to the ground, unable to resist any longer. Alexei, breathing heavily, looked down at him. His face was full of anger, but there was something else in his eyes. The realization that victory would not bring him any consolation. Marina rushed to Sergei, helping him up. She looked at Alexei pleadingly. Please, Alexei, stop. Enough of this madness. We've all suffered enough. Alexei looked at Marina and Sergei, who were sitting on the ground, exhausted and defeated. He felt his rage begin to fade, leaving a place of emptiness and weariness. He realized that revenge would not return him to his former happiness and would not heal his wounds. You both got yours, Alexei said, his voice becoming quieter and softer. Now live with it, and I will go my way. With these words, Alexei turned and went deep into the forest, leaving Marina and Sergei alone with their pain and regrets. Alexei wandered through the forest. His steps were heavy, and his thoughts were confused in his head. He didn't know what would happen next, but he felt that he could no longer stay in this city. His heart was broken, but he knew that he must continue to live for the sake of his son, Ivan. Sergei, sitting on the ground, tried to come to his senses. Marina, supporting him, helped him get up. They were both silent, realizing that they could no longer return to their old lives. Their love was destroyed, and their future now seemed uncertain. Alexei's new life. Returning home, Alexei collected his things and began to prepare for the move. He understood that staying in this city, where every place reminded of betrayal, was unbearable. Alexei decided to go to another city, where no one would know about his past, and start a new life with Ivan. Ivan, although still too young to fully understand what had happened, sensed the changes and supported his father. They left together, leaving all the memories and pain behind. Alexei walked slowly through the forest, leaving behind him the place where the battle took place. His body ached with fatigue, and his soul was empty. He stopped at the edge of a small clearing, where a stream gurgled quietly, and sank to the ground. The water in the stream was cold, but he splashed his face, trying to wash away not only the dirt and sweat, but also the weight of recent events. Alexei sat by the stream for a long time, thinking about his life and what happened. He realized that even winning the fight did not give him back what was lost. Revenge did not bring him satisfaction, but only left him feeling bitter and empty. He realized that he could not stay in this city, where every place reminded him of pain and betrayal. Having made a decision, he returned home, where his son Ivan was waiting for him. Scene with Marina and Sergei. While Alexei was thinking by the stream, Marina and Sergei remained at the battle site. Sergei lay on the ground, breathing heavily, his body covered with bruises and abrasions. Marina bent over him. Her eyes were full of tears. "Sergei, forgive me," she said, her voice trembling with fear and guilt. "I didn't want it to end like this." Sergei struggled to his feet, leaning on Marina. He looked at her, and in his eyes you could see not only pain, but also disappointment. "We are both to blame, Marina," he said. "Now we have to live with the consequences of our actions." They walked slowly back to the city, each step a reminder of their mistakes and losses. Their relationship will never be the same again. Sergei felt that he had lost not only a friend, but also a part of himself. Alexei's return home. Alexei returned home, where Ivan was waiting for him. The boy looked at his father with alarm, seeing that he was exhausted and depressed. "Dad, what happened?" Ivan asked, his eyes full of concern. Alexei squatted down in front of his son and hugged him. "Everything will be fine, son," he said, trying to sound confident. "We will leave here and start a new life." Alexei began to pack his things, trying not to think about what he was leaving behind. He knew that new challenges awaited them, but he was confident that they would cope. Marina and Sergei in the city. Marina and Sergei returned to the city, but their meeting with the residents was cold. News of the fight spread quickly and people started talking about it behind their backs. Marina felt judgmental glances on her. Her heart was broken. Sergei, despite the physical pain, tried to support Marina. He knew they had a lot to go through, but he hoped they could find a path to forgiveness and a new life. Alexei walked slowly through the forest, leaving behind him the place where the battle took place. His body ached with fatigue and his soul was empty. He stopped at the edge of a small clearing where a stream gurgled quietly and sank to the ground. The water in the stream was cold, but he splashed his face, trying to wash away not only the dirt and sweat, but also the weight of recent events. Alexei sat by the stream for a long time, thinking about his life and what happened. He realized that even winning the fight did not give him back what was lost. Revenge did not bring him satisfaction, but only left him feeling bitter and empty. He realized that he could not stay in this city, where every place reminded him of pain and betrayal. Having made a decision, he returned home, where his son Ivan was waiting for him. Marina and Sergei returned to the city, but their meeting with the residents was cold. News of the fight spread quickly and people started talking about it behind their backs. Marina felt judgmental glances on her. Her heart was broken. They walked along the main street, and it seemed that every house, every window, and every door looked at them reproachfully. Neighbor Anna, who usually waved her hand at Marina, turned away this time, defiantly taking her children from the street. Marina felt her eyes fill with tears, but she could not allow herself to cry in public. "Hello, Marina," Anna said, without looking her in the eye. "Are you all right?" "Hello, Anna," Marina answered, trying to remain calm. "Yes, everything is fine." Anna nodded, but her expression showed that she didn't believe a word of it. Marina felt even more isolated. Sergei walked next to her, feeling the same glances on him. He knew that many of these people had once considered him a friend, but now saw him as a traitor. They passed by a store where Sergei had previously been a regular customer. The owners of the store, the Petrov family, came out onto the porch and looked at them with obvious contempt. "Look who's coming," Nikolai Petrov said loudly, turning to his wife. "I wonder where they are going now. After all, there is no place for them in our city anymore." Marina quickened her pace, trying to quickly get away from this unpleasant look. Sergei sighed, realizing that the Petrovs were expressing what. They reached Marina's house, old but cozy, in which she and Alexei spent so many happy years. The house now seemed alien and cold. Marina opened the door and they went inside. Sergei looked around, realizing that everything here reminded of the past. "What are we going to do, Marina?" he asked quietly, sitting down on a chair. Marina hugged herself with her arms, as if trying to warm herself from the inner cold. "I don't know, Sergei," she answered, "but we will have to move on somehow. We cannot go back to the past and correct our mistakes." At that moment, there was a knock on the door. Marina came up and opened it. expecting to see another ill-wisher, but on the threshold stood old man Ivanovich, the elder of the village and a man whom everyone respected. "Marina, I need to talk to you and Sergei," he said, his voice soft but firm. They invited Ivanovich to come in, and he sat down at the table. The old man looked at them for a long time before speaking. "I know you've both made mistakes," he began, "but the city can't live in constant hatred and discord. You'll have to find a way to make amends to the people. It won't be easy, but if you want to stay here, you'll have to work at it." Ivanovich's words were like a balm for Marina's soul. She realized that they still had a chance for redemption. Sergei nodded, agreeing with his words. "Thank you, Ivanovich," he said. "We will try our best." Ivanovich stood up and before leaving added, "Remember that time heals wounds, but you will have to be patient and diligent. People will not forgive right away, but if you are honest and sincere, they will be able to do it in time." After he left, Marina and Sergei sat in silence for a long time, pondering his words. They understood that a difficult path lay ahead of them, but they had hope that they could find their place in this city. The next day they began working to restore their reputation. Sergei helped residents with repair work that had been delayed for a long time, and Marina began to engage in charity work, helping poor families and children. They knew the road to forgiveness would be long, but now they had purpose and hope for a better future. This story showed them all that mistakes and betrayal can destroy lives, but only forgiveness and fortitude can help cope with the consequences. Alexei found the strength to move forward, leaving pain and hatred behind, while Marina and Sergei were left to look for their place in the world, realizing their mistakes.